What's up guys, I'm Josh Mosman and welcome to another motocross action video. Today we have some exotic Italian two-strokes to test. We got the Beta 125RR, it's the off-road race bike, and this bike retails for $8,999. And we have a 200 two-stroke Beta 200RR off-road race bike. This one retails for $9,799. Excited to ride these two bikes today in the trails here at Glen Helen Raceway. It's the middle of June, but somehow we have drizzling rain, perfect conditions for riding. We're gonna have some fun on these two strokes. So what differentiates the Beta 125RR standard model and the 200RR versus the race edition bikes that we tested? Well, first off, we got to mention that Beta makes a ton of different models. And the one unique thing about Beta is that when you order a bike, it's custom made for you. They're basically made to order. They don't have a lot of them on dealership floors. So that's one interesting part about them. But what makes the 125 and 200 standard different versus the race edition models that we tested? Well, first off, the suspension, that's a big one. The stock models come with Sachs open cartridge forks and a Sachs shock, while the race edition bikes come with Kayaba closed cartridge forks and shocks. The Kayaba rear suspension also has slightly longer travel. Front and rear is slightly longer with the Kayaba suspension. Premix, the stock 200RR is oil injected, but the race edition bike is not. It uses premix for lubricant inside the engine. However, both the 125RR, the stock, and the race edition model, they're both using 50-to-1 premix. Aesthetically, they look different. The stock models are black and red. The race edition models are red and blue. And they also come with blue gripper seat covers to match the plastics. Accessories, the race edition models come with quick release front axles for getting that front wheel on and off quickly during a race. Black anodized alloy shift and brake levers, so a little bit cooler, a little bit stronger. Dual material rear sprockets to add a little bit of durability to your sprocket. Steel teeth with aluminum cores, and they have billet aluminum foot pegs. The tires are different as well. Maxxis Enduro tires come stock, while the race editions come with ISDE Metzler tires. Engine, the 200 actually has a different cylinder head that ups the compression ratio from 13.65 to 14.4 on the race edition model. It also has a single power valve spring that's stiffer than the dual power valve spring that comes on the standard bike. So a lot of differences there. Also protection, the standard and race edition bikes, they do come with skid plates, but only the race edition bikes come with handguards. So pretty cool that Beta offers race edition and standard models. You can kind of customize exactly what you want on your bike. That's pretty cool that you get that with Beta. So how did the Beta 200 ride on the track? Starting things off, this thing was extra strong on the bottom end. We were super impressed with the initial grunt it had coming out of corners. It felt like a heavily modded 125, but did not have the power of a 252 stroke on the top end. Riding through the corners and tighter sections, the bottom end was mellow and very user-friendly. When riding hard and really getting into the gas for faster sections, the engine revved out quickly and needed to be short shifted to get into the power. Unfortunately, it didn't like to be shifted under a load, and our testers had to really make sure to pull in the clutch and chop the throttle slightly to shift into the next gear, something that we're not really used to doing. Luckily, our local stomping grounds here at Glen Helen have miles and miles of off-road trails, so we had lots of rocky creek beds to ride through, some tighter technical trails. It doesn't have the top end of a 250 or 300 two-stroke, but this bike attacked the rugged trails with ease. So after riding the 200, riding the 125 was a big difference. The 125 was lacking bottom end big time. And yes, this is a versus video, but more it's really like a brother-sister video talking about the pros and cons of each bike, because there is an extra 75 cc's of displacement on the 200, giving it a huge advantage. But the 125 isn't so bad either, and they're actually very close on power. The 125, yes, you had to shift, you actually had to shift a lot less than the 125. You really had to wring out the power, because the power was positioned all on the top end, where it was completely opposite with the 200. On the off-road trails, we were definitely missing the 200's power coming out of corners, that little bit of grunt and torque that it had. But the Beta 125 was better on the track for us and more on the wide open sections, because it carried gears longer and it actually revved out much better than the 200. Compared to a YZ 125 or any carbureted Austrian 125, there's usually a little bit of a lag on the throttle with two-strokes, carbureted two-strokes especially, but the Beta, surprisingly, it picks up and gets into the meat of the power super easily on both the 125 and 200s. That was our favorite part about it, and that really rings true with Beta's tagline of rideability. To help get some more bottom end snap, we recommend using the lightest power valve spring and also removing the inner auxiliary spring inside the power valve as well. This just helps the exhaust port to open up sooner and get the 125 into the meat of the power faster. So when we first looked at the dyno chart comparing these two bikes, I thought there was an issue. I thought we messed up the dyno chart. It wasn't overlaid properly, because they were nowhere near each other. I don't think I've ever seen a comparison of two bikes on the dyno that was so different. It was crazy. Obviously, like I mentioned, it's a different cc displacement. The 200 versus 125, very different on the dyno. Let's take a look at it. So the 125 RR, it has a traditional 125 power band that is similar to a YZ 125. The Beta is at 27.5 horsepower at 10,000 RPM, while the YZ is at 30. So pretty big difference up there on the top end. 10,500, the Beta ramps back up to an impressive 35 horsepower, while the YZ 125 peaks out at 35.7. The 200RR Race Edition's dyno curve, completely opposite of the 125RR, where the 125 was all top and no bottom. The 200 is all bottom and no top. The 200 is actually lower on peak horsepower from the 125, but it doesn't really feel like it on the track. The 200 starts out at 20 horsepower, 6,000 RPM, while the 125 is at 11 horsepower. Okay, that is a huge difference. 9 horsepower difference right there at the crack of the throttle at 6,000 RPM. Finally, the Beta 200RR hits its peak horsepower at 9,200 RPM with 33.23 horsepower. So just under that 35 mark the 125 hit. 1.5 horsepower difference between the 125 and 200. It's pretty wild, but it makes sense. We talked to Pro Circuits R&D technician Schneike. Schneike talked about the pipes tell the story. The Beta 200 pipe looks like it's meant to be on a 300. It's got all bottom end grunt, while the 125 is short, snappy, and it's meant for a 125 power band. So 125 all top end, 200 all bottom end, completely different power bands in the dyno and on the track. Obviously, the suspension was very soft, set up for enduro riding. But the Kayaba suspension, yes, it was still pleasant still on the track. The Kayaba forks have slightly more travel than the Sachs forks, and the shock is actually a full inch more of travel than the Sachs shock that comes on the standard bike. So we were thankful to have the race edition models. A couple of our test riders actually raced it on the Arroyo track, the vet track we have here at Glen Helen. And that track's a little more dry and skatey, doesn't have as deep of corners. And the soft suspension helped our test riders get sharp cornering and be able to dive underneath the competition. So they did like the cornering ability of these bikes, even on the track. So on the trails, the Beta 125 and 200 RRs, they really shined. Yes, they're weighed down by the oversized tanks, the headlights, tail light. They even got speedometers on them. The 200 is electric starting, so all these things add weight, but these bikes were super nimble on the trails. We were super impressed with how easy they were to stop, turn, make sharp, quick adjustments. Overall, very nimble. And although they weren't light, they felt really light on the track. So overall, MXA Wrecking Crew, we had a lot of fun testing these bikes. The Beta 125 RR Race Edition model, yes, it's great for woods and tight technical trails. I would say better than the Yamaha, better than KTM, better than Husqvarna and Gas 125s for tight technical stuff. If I'm racing a GNCC race, I think I would pick the Beta over the other models, at least initially. Just the initial smooth roll-on power is something that is really hard to find and really takes perfect jetting to find on a 125 two-stroke. The Beta found that rideability slogan, that rideability character was really impressive on the 125. Obviously, if you're racing high-speed West Coast desert-style off-road races, you're going to want a little more over-rev power like you get on a Yamaha or KTM, Husqvarna, or Gas. As for the 200, it's not quite a race bike because most racers would want a 250 two-stroke or even a 300 or a little bit more. But the 200 is ultra fun for training, technical riding. You can't race it in a 125 class, so that's a little bit of a bummer there. But man, all of our test riders preferred the 200 because it feels like a 125 that you can lug around the track. It feels like a super modded 125 or even modified 150 because you can lug it around the track. It's easy and nimble to still turn in the trails and just fun to navigate over rocks and logs. So yes, this is a versus video, so we do pick the 200 as the winning bike for this video, but there are some downsides to it. You can't race it in the 125 class and you have to shift a lot to get the most out of that bike. So we had a lot of fun testing these bikes. We have a full written article in Motocross Action magazine in the October issue. You can check it out. Be sure to subscribe to Motocross Action magazine. $25 a year, and we'll send you a free $25 e-gift card to Rocky Mountain ATV MC Online. Thank you guys for watching this video. We'll see you in the next one.